I stood there in disbelief, my boots sinking slightly into the churned earth where my cornfield had once stood tall. The sound of crunching stalks still echoed in my ears as I watched that glaring red Jeep crawl to a stop, its thick tires smeared with the remains of 3 acres worth of our best crop. Behind the wheel sat the woman who'd made herself my personal nightmare for the last year, the self-appointed queen of suburban entitlement, grinning like she had every right in the world to destroy what generations of my family had built. She stepped out of the Jeep like she was arriving at a garden club meeting, not the scene of nearly $32,000 in damage. "This is official HOA business," she said, brushing a few golden strands of corn silk off her pristine blazer. "There have been ongoing concerns about your farm creeping over the property boundary. The nerve, the absolute audacity. My name's Tom Mitchell. Nobody calls me Thomas unless they're reading legal documents or writing my obituary. I'm 58 years old, born and raised on the same soil my grandfather bought in 1937. He'd worked 2 jobs, saved every dime, and finally bought these 200 acres outright during one of the hardest times in American history. This land wasn't just dirt and crops. It was our family's backbone. My father taught me to plow here just like I taught my son, and now I was hoping to teach my grandson too. But all that history didn't mean a damn thing to people like her. For decades, we lived among other farmers, folks who understood boundaries, both literal and unspoken. We respected one another's space, helped when storms hit, and never complained about the sounds or smells of hard work. That world vanished the day Willow Creek Estates broke ground. Suddenly, our east field bordered a row of designer homes with stone gates and fake English street names. At first, I made peace with it. I even planted wildflowers along our shared edge so their backyard views wouldn't be marred by unsightly soybeans. I let them use our north field for their holiday events. For a while, things were civil. Some of the neighbors even thanked me for keeping the area picturesque. Then Victoria Reynolds moved in. She came with a resume from some Fortune 500 company and the smug belief that her HOA rules extended beyond her property lines. From the day she took over, I received a flood of complaints. My tractors were too noisy, the air too earthy, and my existence apparently too rural. She accused me of damaging her property values every time the wind carried a bit of fertilizer sent her way. I tried reasoning. I even invited her to the farm so she could see what we actually did. She turned me down flat. "I don't have time for petting zoos, Mr. Mitchell," she'd said. "This isn't agricultural Disneyland." Still, I didn't see what was coming. August 23rd was a perfect morning. Clear skies, cool breeze, rare for late summer. I was checking moisture levels in our southeast field, finally seeing the fruits of 2 terrible years of weather. This crop would have cleared our debt from last year's flooding. It would have helped send Connor's boy to college. Then I heard it, an engine too high-pitched and aggressive to be any of our machines. I reached the ridge and stopped cold. That damn Jeep was tearing through row after row of tall, golden corn. The tires chewed through our best section like it was a video game obstacle course. I radioed Connor immediately, barely holding back the fury in my voice. He pulled up just as the Jeep came to a sputtering halt, stuck, thankfully, in a muddy patch over our irrigation line. The driver's door opened, and Victoria emerged like she was stepping onto a stage. Not a trace of remorse in her expression, just irritation. "Tom," she snapped, hands on her hips, "why are you acting like this is a problem?" I was speechless. 3 acres ruined. Months of planning, planting, and praying. All turned into compost by someone playing pretend sheriff for her cookie-cutter suburb. Connor wasn't so silent. "You know damn well there's a service road, lady. You could have used it like a normal human being." She didn't flinch. "We had a credible report of encroachment. I was doing my duty." Her duty had just wrecked nearly everything we'd worked for that season. But what she didn't know, what she should have known if she'd ever bothered to check a land survey, was that the clubhouse at Willow Creek, that shiny glass box with the infinity pool and tennis courts, it sat on 2 acres still legally owned by me. See, back when they were building Willow Creek, the developer made a handshake deal with my late father to lease the land beneath the clubhouse, thinking they'd buy it later. The paperwork got lost when the builder went bankrupt and sold the development mid-construction. The new HOA? They never followed up. So while she was destroying my crop in the name of defending community standards, I was holding the keys to something far more valuable. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just turned, walked to my truck, and called my lawyer. 2 weeks later, I had the permits in hand. The lease was void. The land was mine again. And the bulldozer? That came next. On a bright Saturday morning, with half the neighborhood gathered on their porches and phones raised high, I rolled up with my John Deere and started tearing the place down. Glass cracked. Water sprayed from busted pipes. Victoria screamed like someone was stealing her purse. But I didn't stop. When it was done, all that was left of their precious clubhouse was rubble and a shallow crater where the pool used to shimmer. And me? I stood on my land, dirt on my boots, hands on my hips, and nodded. Sometimes, the only way to deal with a bully is to remind them where they're standing. I stood just inside the door of the Willow Creek Clubhouse, clutching a folder that felt heavier than it should have. The polished wood conference table gleamed under recessed lighting, and 5 HOA board members sat like royalty, eyes narrowed. At the head sat Victoria, her expression a blend of condescension and mild irritation. She gave a tight smile. Let's keep this brief. I trust this isn't another overreaction to our community standards enforcement. I didn't answer right away. I laid out the documents, survey maps, deed records, and a notarized letter from our attorney. The gold-embossed logo on her business card flashed through my mind. The way she tossed it at me days earlier like it absolved her of tearing through my land. For days earlier, her red Jeep had roared through my field without warning, plowing through 3 acres of corn like it was nothing more than tall grass. When I confronted her, she waved it off with a smirk. Routine compliance check, she had said, stepping out of her vehicle with her phone already dialing a tow company. Your outdated agricultural practices are a blight on the neighborhood. Honestly, you're lucky I didn't report it sooner. When I pointed out the extensive crop damage, she laughed, and told me to speak to their legal department if I had concerns. As if crushing $30,000 worth of crops was a minor inconvenience. But the moment her tow truck arrived and ripped deeper trenches into my land, churning the soil and destroying even more yield, something shifted in me. The damage was undeniable, and the sheriff's photos, my insurance adjuster's report, and a mountain of muddy corn stalks backed me up. Still, the sheriff had called it a civil matter. No charges, just paperwork and a hollow apology. I hadn't expected justice, not when the HOA had money and attorneys on retainer. But what Victoria didn't know was that Connor, my grandson, had sparked an idea that would turn everything around. We should double-check the property lines, he'd said. If she's claiming we crossed into their land, let's be sure they haven't crossed into ours. What started as a way to calm me down turned into something much bigger. Old records, faded plats, original deeds from when the development was first planned, we sifted through everything. That's when we found it. A 2.8-acre parcel with a messy ownership history. Sold to my uncle during a rough time in '62, deeded back 2 years later. The surveyors for Willow Creek had missed it entirely. Their massive, state-of-the-art clubhouse was squatting right on top of it. I reviewed it again and again, comparing legal descriptions, GIS overlays, even satellite imagery. There was no mistake. They had built their pride and joy right over our boundary. The eastern third of the building, a tennis court, and part of the infinity pool were all on land that legally belonged to my family. Now, back in that conference room, I watched Victoria leaf through the documentation, her posture stiffening with each page. "This can't be right," one board member muttered. "It's correct," I replied calmly. "The land you're sitting on isn't fully yours, and I have the deeds to prove it." The room went quiet. "I'm not here just about the corn," I continued. "I'm here because you trespassed. You damaged private property. And your flagship facility, your marketing centerpiece, was built without permits, without compensation, and without consent." Victoria opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "My attorney confirms I have the right to demand removal of any structure built illegally on my land." I could bulldoze that tennis court tomorrow and you'd have no legal ground to stop me. She looked like she'd swallowed glass. And the crop damage? One of the other board members asked quietly. That's secondary now, I said. But consider it leverage. I'm willing to discuss a resolution. One that includes full compensation, soil repair, and a long-term easement agreement, under my terms. Victoria looked ready to explode, but the others were already scanning the documents, their expressions grim. For the first time in days, I felt the fog lift. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about setting things right. My family's legacy had been plowed under by arrogance and entitlement. But they hadn't counted on what farmers know best. You don't plant over what you haven't earned. And boundaries, once crossed, always leave a mark. I spread the updated land surveys across their glossy boardroom table, cutting off Victoria mid-sentence. Tom, before you go further, she said, trying to maintain composure. This meeting is a courtesy. Our legal team already reviewed. You're all currently trespassing, I said flatly. Silence. Victoria blinked rapidly. Probably the first time I'd ever seen her thrown off. What exactly are you saying? Robert Coleman asked carefully. He was the HOA vice president and a retired engineer, known for being the only reasonable person on that board. I laid it out clean and calm. The clubhouse, the pride of their gated community, was illegally built on my property. Half of the building, including most of the pool and one of the tennis courts, stood on my family's land. Victoria scoffed. That's ridiculous. The developer confirmed all boundaries before building. They missed a parcel, I said. It was temporarily deeded within my family back in the 60s and never transferred back correctly. Your surveyors never caught it. I made eye contact with every board member before continuing. You have two options. Pay me for the crop damage and agree to my terms, or I reclaim the land, which means removing anything built on it. Victoria let out a shaky laugh and looked around the table for support. You're not serious. You want us to tear down $1 million structure over corn. I've already filed the legal paperwork. You have 48 hours to respond. After that, I start demolition. Robert leaned forward, calculating everything silently. What exactly are you asking for? I spelled it out. $50,000 for crop loss and soil damage. Victoria's resignation. A written apology published in the community bulletin. A formal easement agreement with a $15,000 annual payment. A binding agreement respecting standard farming practices on my land. Victoria slapped the table. This is blackmail. We'll sue you for intimidation. Please do, I said. I'll happily explain to a judge how you destroyed $32,000 worth of crops and then sent me a bill for the towing. If you've ever been bullied by an HOA, you're not alone. These organizations only have the control you allow them to have. They asked me to step out while they called an emergency session. Through the glass doors, I saw the debate unfold. Victoria was animated and red-faced. Robert looked like he was trying to calm her down. Two other members seemed to be siding with him. But the next morning, instead of a counteroffer, I received a certified letter. They were rejecting everything, calling my claims fabricated and accusing me of issuing threats. They even warned me not to come near the clubhouse with equipment or face criminal charges. I forwarded the letter to Bill, my lawyer. They're bluffing, he said. The maps are solid. I'll file for an injunction immediately. 3 days later, we were in court. Judge Harriet Michaels, a sharp woman with a farming background, didn't waste time. The HOA tried arguing adverse possession and public need, but she shut them down. Adverse possession requires 20 years. This encroachment hasn't existed for even 15. And public necessity only applies to government projects, she said. Her judgment was clear. I owned the land. The HOA had built illegally on it. I had full rights to remove the structure unless an agreement was reached. She encouraged both parties to settle quickly. As she said this, her gaze landed directly on Victoria, who looked like she was biting glass. With the ruling in hand, I gave them my final terms once more with a 24-hour deadline. That evening, residents started calling. They'd received an HOA email from Victoria, claiming I was extorting the neighborhood and announcing an emergency $2,000 per household assessment to cover legal costs. Several neighbors asked to see my proof. I showed them everything: surveys, deeds, the judge's order. Most were stunned. Some were furious at Victoria. By midnight, they had organized their own meeting without her. No response came. At 7 a.m. sharp, I drove my yellow Caterpillar bulldozer toward the clubhouse, accompanied by Bill and a county sheriff. The sheriff had a stack of documents affirming my right to proceed. Word had spread. News cameras showed up. Curious neighbors lined the street. Some were visibly angry, but more than I expected were nodding in quiet approval. Victoria stood on the steps, flanked by security, wearing that same royal blue blazer she'd worn the day she flattened my cornfield. Her expression was a mix of fury and fear as the bulldozer rolled closer. She had no idea what was about to hit her. The roar of the engine filled the morning air as I aligned the bulldozer right at the edge of my land. The sheriff, holding a thick packet of papers, stepped up to Victoria, while Bill raised a bullhorn and declared, "This is your last chance, Victoria. Accept Mr. Mitchell's fair settlement, or removal begins now." Victoria, face red with fury, ripped the documents from the sheriff's hand and shouted, "You'll regret this. We'll take everything from you in court." I didn't respond. Instead, I shifted into gear and lowered the blade toward the edge of the luxurious infinity pool. As steel touched concrete, a hush fell over the crowd. The crack was sharp, and water poured from the breach as the pool wall gave in. There was no sense of triumph, only a sober feeling of justice being restored after the violation of my livelihood. As the dozer crept toward the foundation of their clubhouse, a man sprinted from the gathered crowd, suit coat flapping. It was Robert Coleman, the HOA's vice president. He waved his arms and shouted, "Stop! We agree. The board voted to accept your proposal. Victoria is out." I turned off the machine. The damage was minimal, just a broken pool edge, but the message had landed. Robert explained that after reviewing all legal documents and boundary maps the night before, the residents had held an emergency vote. By an overwhelming majority, they had removed Victoria from the board and endorsed my original agreement. Victoria was quickly escorted off the premises, still hurling threats as she climbed into the same red Jeep that had trampled my crops. The crowd applauded as she sped off. The irony was rich. Soon, Robert returned with Margaret Winters, a retired judge now appointed as interim president. She extended her hand and said, "On behalf of the entire Willow Creek community, we're deeply sorry for the harm done to your farm and your rights. We fully accept your terms and hope to rebuild trust." But they didn't just stop at the original agreement. They proposed a yearly heritage event to honor agricultural traditions, a monthly farmers market hosted in the community lot, educational outreach to local schools, and a renaming of the park to Mitchell Fields in honor of my family's history on that land. Within a few days, I received full reimbursement for the damaged crops. Their formal apology appeared not just in the community bulletin, but also in the town paper. The crowning gesture came in the form of a bronze marker installed at the community entrance. It honored the land's farming history and acknowledged my family's presence since 1937. Victoria left the neighborhood within weeks, relocating to Florida, where, I hear, she's now clashing with her condo board over sea turtle lighting ordinances. Since her departure, the atmosphere between my farm and the neighborhood has completely transformed. Residents now understand what farming involves, and many even help during busy seasons. Grandparents bring grandkids out to learn about crops. The annual Heritage Day has grown into a major event, attracting people from all over the region. The farmers' market flourishes, giving me a reliable and more profitable way to sell produce directly. Some neighbors have even taken up gardening, and I help guide them in sustainable methods. Most importantly, there's mutual understanding now. The new HOA board respects that their development and my farmland can coexist, so long as we acknowledge both physical and communal boundaries. The real lesson here goes beyond fences and deeds. It's about understanding that communities aren't formed just when a subdivision is platted. They're rooted in the past, shaped by the land, and built on relationships that span generations. HOAs are meant to uphold standards and property values, but they must not become tools for personal power or disregard for neighboring landowners. When they do, they undermine the very unity they were created to foster. The best neighborhoods understand their place in a broader history, a shared future. Victoria's mistake wasn't just about trespassing. She failed to grasp that her neighborhood's well-being was tied to mine. Driving through my cornfield wasn't just illegal. It was a symbolic rejection of the mutual support that makes a community whole. By trying to assert total control, she lost everything: her title, her influence, even her home. But when the residents embraced cooperation, we all came out ahead. I gained justice and recognition. They retained their amenities and gained a wealth of new experiences, education, and fresh produce. Together, we built something stronger than either of us could alone. A genuine neighborly connection. This was never just about crops or buildings. It was about proving that land rights aren't abstract. They're part of a living agreement between people. When someone violates that pact, they weaken the very fabric of community. But when respect and fairness guide us, we create places where everyone can thrive. Now, every time I drive by the community entrance and see that bronze plaque, I'm reminded that respect is what gives land its true value. Not just price tags, but purpose, history, and future care. Even my grandson, Connor, who at first wanted to sue for a massive settlement, now sees the bigger picture. "You didn't just win, Grandpa," he said. "You changed how they see us. That's worth more than any lawsuit." Sometimes the only way to earn respect is to roll up in a bulldozer, not to destroy, but to remind others that deep roots deserve to be honored, not paved over. If you're dealing with a hostile HOA or someone who ignores your rights, know this. Understand your boundaries, keep records, and don't back down. Your legacy might just depend on it.